for Federated Global Equities. Steve is a frequent contributor on CNBC, Fox Business News, Bloomberg TV, and a long-standing participant in Barron's annual Investment Outlook panel, and a member of the Economic Club of New York and the New York Society of Security Analysts, and a charter financial analyst with CFA. He earned his undergraduate degree at Princeton, where he graduated summa cum laude, and a graduate degree from the Harvard Business School, where he was a Baker Scholar. As you know, here at the Busch School, one of our key things we want to get across is the integration of faith and business. And to be excellent in both is important and appropriate. So perhaps most importantly, Steve is a devout, deep man of faith. He's on the national board and one of the founders of the Lumen Institute. He's participated in missions in Mexico with his wife Evelyn. And he's led a New York Street mission for 10 years, where his wife, I think, he's worked with it. Steve and his wife are involved in a number of apostolic activities, including a spiritual tour of the Metropolitan Museum of Art called Man's Search for God, a history of art through the prism of faith. Steve also serves on the board for the program of church management with Santa Croce University in Rome, of which I'm a professor in Steve. Thank you for being part of that program. Steve has two wonderful boys, Richard and Michael. So let's welcome Steve and Auth.
Well, thank you for having me. It's really kind of exciting to be here, and this beautiful lecture hall reminds me of both my educational institutions. At Princeton, I took a course of 101 or something, Physics for Poets, I think it was called. But it was in a hall like this where all these, this was formerly a chemistry building, I understand. But also the layout is really like Harvard Business School with the outside. How many folks are from this class? Raise your hand. Are you in the seat you normally sit in, or are you kind of disorganized today because of all the visitors? Like at Harvard, everyone sat in the first chair every day from the very beginning of the class. We all have a sort of territorial attitude. I'm going to talk today about something called humility at the highs, and it's one of my, if you remember my investment team up in New York and Pittsburgh, you would have heard this talk in some form or another because it's one of my big mottos, humility at the highs, confidence at the lows, integrity always. It's kind of how we approach the business. And I put this together because after launching this book of ours, and there are some copies, one of the board members, the Blanfords, from Blanford Chapel, donated some books for you all. So I'm very happy to sign them afterwards, or if you catch me on campus, carry the book around. I'll be around for the day. In any case, one of the first questions I've been getting is like this sort of shock that a guy from Wall Street would do something as crazy as a street mission in New York City, we're viewed as more, greedy, selfish individuals, very short-term oriented. So I developed this presentation as sort of the antidote to that, and it's kind of the way I go on in life. This first slide, who's been to Pittsburgh? Anyone? So, Pittsburgh, Three Rivers Stadium, there's a link for me with Pittsburgh, both in terms of the very first book I wrote, which has nothing to do with the current one. But this is the site of Fort Duquesne here at the fort. And we've got these two rivers, as you know, the Allegheny and the Monongahela, have joined together to form one river. And a lot of folks approach their business life like they're separate rivers. I've got my business life and I've got church on Sunday mornings. And what I would suggest, and what this presentation is about, is that you can think of the three rivers as a kind of, coming together, right? A spiritual journey, if you will, that there's a worldly journey. And these two journeys are all leading in the same place, which is eternity. And that's the road to heaven. So I think this idea of the three rivers and the two rivers coming together, I'd like you to come away from this presentation believing and understanding that this is very important to your success in whatever business endeavor you do, but it's also important to your success in getting to heaven, which is our ultimate objective, right? And this first, so I'm going to take you through a bunch of elements that initially you're familiar with, but I'm going to try to show you how they're relevant in a business context. So the first, of course, is prayer. Prayer is the source of communication with God, right? It's the basis of all good love relationships is communication. And, you know, in the case of prayer, you know, on the spiritual side, I would say that as you grow in the spiritual life, you begin to learn that prayer is more than just reciting the Hail Mary 3 times. It's listening. And the image here of Elijah at the cave, how many folks are familiar with the image of Elijah at the cave, the story? So Elijah is going up to the mountain to have this conversation with God. He's been directed to go there. God says, I'll meet you up at the top of the mountain. And he goes, and there's this earthquake, and he thinks that must be God coming. Then there's a tornado, and then there's, you know, fireball and thunder, and he keeps thinking this is God showing up, and it's not. And it's only when Elijah sits down, kind of forlornly almost, at the entrance to the cave, and shuts up. In the quiet, gentle breeze, he hears the Lord's voice. And so, you know, in the prayer life, you learn that listening becomes very important, because if all you're doing is talking, you can't hear what God is telling you to do. I'll tell you, this technique is a beautiful thing in the business world. Way too many people I know end up doing all the talking. And you go to a meeting, especially if you're a leader, you know, it's very, very dangerous when the leader's doing all the talking, because you don't get the input of others. I mean, one of the things you'll do here at the business school, I'm sure, is do a lot of team-based activities. And the value of that for you is learning the ability to, in a team, to listen to the input of others. And when you can sit back, that's communication. Communication is not just telling everyone what you think, it's hearing what they think. And in Federated, I'm sort of known for this leadership style that mostly just asks questions, frankly. Now, my folks kind of know where those are going. They've come to realize over time, well, Steve is trying to get this person to realize something. But rather than just tell them, I'll ask questions, because I want people to experience the answer for themselves, right? And sometimes I'll find an answer I wasn't expecting, and we'll go a different direction. So communication is important. Excellence, now this is viewed as a purely secular idea, you know, that the pursuit of excellence is a very much a kind of worldly thing, if you will. But if you think about it, this comes right out of the scriptures. And, you know, particularly the parable of the talents, you're all familiar with in Mark's gospel, I think. Everyone familiar with, well, maybe I should ask, parable of the talents. So that's where the master of the house goes away and he gives each servant, depending on how well along in his career, if you will, that servant is, a different number of talents. And talents in Hebrew actually was a coin, but it has come to mean broadly borrowed talents, if you will, or God-given gifts. And so he gives one steward 10, one 5, one 1. The 10 doubles it to 20. When the guy gets back, the 5 doubles it to 10. The 1 is afraid and buries the talent. And the purpose of the parable that the Lord is teaching us, and Cardinal Ratzinger, at the time Cardinal Ratzinger, Pope Benedict later, talks about this, that we're all given talents by the Lord, and he expects us to use them. We're not supposed to bury our talents in a cave. That's why you came here to Catholic University, to develop those talents, to pursue them, the ones that God gave you. I always tell young people when they're thinking about their career, I said, figure out what you're good at. That's probably where the Lord wants you to go. You know, those are the talents that you've been given and granted. So take those, develop those, make them into the best you can be. And then keep God centered within them. If you think about developing your talents as a God-given vocation, that will take you in a different place. In my case, it led to a very successful career on Wall Street, as you all know, and which is still ongoing. But it gave me a platform to bring a little bit of love into it. You know, our culture at Federated is one that's loving and respectful and generous. And I think, yeah, there's a lot of folks whose lives are maybe better for having worked with us. But I've also learned, as time has developed, that it's given me a platform for a broader message. And, you know, there's a lot of praying that went on about the Missionary at Wall Street, because those of you, has anyone here been on the mission? I know we have several Catholic University students who have. I'm looking in the room, I don't see any familiar faces, but for those of you, may know that there's been these blogs being written by someone called a missionary for a decade. And one of my talents is I can spin a good story out of a narrative. I have that talent, and some very beautiful stories that have occurred over the years from this mission, but always anonymous. And I kept getting pressed by people to put it into a book. It was going to be a book for Catholic bookstores. The title was Delivered by Grace. It's a long story, but what ended up happening is the publisher just changed the title on me at the last minute. And I really struggled with that. It took a lot for me to take that step, because now it's coming out of the closet, if you will. And how will my office staff react? How will my colleagues on Wall Street react when they find out that I'm this Catholic lunatic down in the streets of Soho? And I'll just tell you that I've learned that this platform I have is a great way to get out the message of the Lord. And the reaction's actually been very positive. So Prudence, this is another one that is a kind of, if you will, Catholic concept. The Lord teaches this in the parable of the unfaithful steward, or the bad steward. You may remember the story. It's the guy who comes home and he takes into account a steward who has been cheating him. And he fires the steward. And in between the time when he's been told he's been fired, like his last week on the job, if you will, he calls in everyone who owes the boss money, and he cuts their debt in half. And the reason he does that is he thinks these folks will then take care of him later. And it's an odd parable, because people think, is Jesus endorsing this kind of behavior? No, but what he's saying to his disciples is, look, even a crook has enough foresight to think about what's happening next. Why don't you guys start thinking about that? Eternity is beyond this life. Be prudent. Do the right thing. Get yourself to heaven. That's the message. In prudence, or thinking forward and trying to take the right steps, I tell the missionaries who join us, has anyone ever done something they felt the Lord was calling them to do? I'll ask this class, and then regret it later. Can anyone think of something where they felt the Lord was asking them to do something and then regretted it the next day? Anyone? No. Has anyone ever done something they thought the Lord probably didn't think was a very good idea and then regretted it the next day? Any hands there? Okay, so, that's prudence, right? And prudence, by the way, I always tell folks, I'm in the investment business, as you know. Well, on the investment business, it's all about prudence, right? We've taken this Catholic value and assigned it to the investment world. We're making decisions with other people's money. I had an email from a client yesterday commenting on a radio appearance I did yesterday while I was here in Washington, D.C. And one of the questions was, well, how is this impeachment thing playing out for you guys? I mean, what's your reaction? And my response was, well, Sebastian, understand, we're investing our clients' money. And then there's a long, silent pause. And then I said, and therefore, we have to be very prudent about it. And we sort of go with the facts, not with the politics. And here are the facts, and I lay them out. But the client was very impressed. He said, Steve, that silent pause really indicated how careful you are with my money, which is exactly what Prudence is, right? And at Federated, we're known by management teams around the country for how tough their meetings with us are going to be. And it's because we're trying to make sure we understand what we're investing in. So I know you're working on a project right now to build a business on Amazon. You want to make sure you're prudent about that. You think about, if I do this, then this. Have a plan. Don't just go barreling, into the thing. Have a plan. But I also tell the young people, prudence doesn't mean hiding under a lampshade or not taking risks. In the spiritual life, there's this wonderful story, the calling of St. Peter. And some of you will recall this story where Peter has been listening to the Lord. The Lord arrived at Peter's house, cured his mother-in-law, but he's still not all in on the thing. And Jesus is talking by the shore of Galilee, incidentally, right where he knows Peter is going to be taking his boat in from fishing all night. And Peter is cleaning his nets, but he's out on the water. He's kind of really listening to the Lord, And then at some point, the Lord steps into Peter's boat. Peter's like, what are you doing in my boat? I mean, this was a planned meeting, at least on Jesus' part. But Peter's listening to him, and then the Lord makes a big ask. He says, put out into deep water. And Peter has to assess what to do now, because he's about to make a fool of himself in front of the whole village. He's been fishing all night, hasn't caught a fish. Now this guy wants to put him out into deep water. It's basically saying, take a risk on me. And Peter's heard enough from Jesus that he says to himself, okay, I'll take that risk. And sometimes you do have to almost go with your gut. And in the investment business, I'll tell you that sometimes it comes to that. If all you do is hide and take no risk, you'll have no reward. So there's a very fine balance here, but prudence is part of that. Of course, we know what happens. Anyone what happens to Peter after he goes out into the deep water. He catches so many fish that the boat almost sinks. They get back to shore, leave the fish, and follow him. So perseverance, this is a hugely important virtue in the spiritual life. Faith is, I like to say, it's a lifelong commitment and a daily struggle. If you think it's an endpoint that you get to and then you got it, and some of you might be in the zone right now, I don't know, I saw several people in the chapel, which I thought was terrific early in the morning to see students in the chapel. But let me assure you, it won't always be that way. You will have dry spells and you'll fall out of touch with the Lord. And in my own case, by the time I got out of Harvard Business School, I was practically an agnostic, frankly. And it took me a long time and a series of knocks on the head, that kind of brought me back to him. But the faith journey is one where you have to keep persevering through tough times and good times. And likewise, the business world absolutely rewards perseverance. If you read the stories of all the great entrepreneurs, there were plenty of times when things looked very dark. I think in my own case, building out a global business, first for Prudential and then eventually Federated, there were points I would come home from a long trip with my wife, and at that time at Frederick we had like $6 billion of equities under management, which sounds like a lot of money, but where I was trying to take it didn't seem like much at all. And I just said to her, sweetheart, I don't know if this is going to work. I mean, this is just so hard. And the ability to get up off the canvas and get back into the fight. And St. Paul talks about this, again, on the spiritual life. It's not about winning the race. It's staying in the fight, getting back up off the canvas. And today, we're sitting here with, 70 billion of assets, and it's been a very successful run for us, but it wasn't always so easy. You really have to persevere. This is a quote or a paraphrase from Muhammad Ali, who used to tell people, talked about the heart of a champion. And he said, look, the champion's heart is a combination of skill and will, or a champion is a combination of skill and will. And I tell this to all our young people. I know you think you're very talented, and you are, because if you weren't, you wouldn't be here. But let me assure you, our competitors are similarly talented. This is not, you're not up against a bunch of dopes. It's really about the heart. That's what separates the champion from the everyday. It's the person with the skill, but alongside it, the will to persevere. So, keep that in mind. The heart of a champion is more important than the skill of a champion. Self-mastery. Well, this is, in fact, this is an interesting painting here up in the upper right. It's one of my favorite artists by Rembrandt, and it's called Aristotle with the Bust of Homer. And, we did this tour at the Met, which the professor mentioned. This is not technically one of Rembrandt's self-portraits. He did about 75 of them, but I always tell people on the tour, this to me is his most incredible self-portrait because it's a portrait of his soul. And the backstory here is Rembrandt, who was born and painted in the 1600s, 17th century, or 16th century in Amsterdam, in a Protestant, very Reformed Protestant background. But the world was really dominated. The art world was by these wealthy merchants who were exploring the world and making a lot of money, and they were the patrons. And they would give you an assignment and, to decorate their house, basically. So painting had evolved from the Renaissance to the Baroque. By now it was becoming a kind of interior decorating exercise. And if they liked your interior decoration, if you will, they would give you a gold chain. Rembrandt was the greatest artist of his generation, some would say of all generations. Anyone know how many gold chains Rembrandt earned in his lifetime? Anyone? I wouldn't necessarily expect you to. This is not an art history class. 0. So he never quite managed to do what he was asked to do because he was always trying to create a more uplifting message. And in this case, he's asked to paint a painting of Aristotle, and he does this self-portrait. He didn't get a gold chain for this either because the patrons, who were a little more tuned than maybe we are now to the spirituality of art, could see what's going on here. He's got his right hand on the bust of Homer. That stands for the Christian virtues, at least the classical virtues that were imported into Christianity, self-mastery being one of those. His left hand is fingering this gold chain. You see the gold chain? And you see him fingering it. So what you see here is a painting. If you look at Rembrandt's face, what I love about this, it's a painting of his soul in struggle to decide, do I take the gold chain or do I do the right thing? And it's that combination, that struggle through life, that we all have to endure. And often in the spiritual life or in the investment world or anywhere in the business life, inevitably emotions kind of take over. Things are going badly, someone says something that upsets you, and you kind of lose it, right? And it's usually at those points that mistakes get made. So one of the things I really inculcate in our folks at Federated is the importance of self-mastery. Like, if you're losing it, I'd really rather not that you kind of air that out. I mean, I'm okay with constructive discussion, but this idea that we're here to all, express our feelings and yell at each other, that's not healthy. You say things that you can't take back, and then in a cooler moment, you probably didn't mean to say. So, when I was younger, what I used to do was just leave my office and go around the block. And there are situations in my world, you can imagine, where people will say something really upsetting. And you can see that they've really, hit a button. But inevitably, maybe what I'll do is I'll say, okay, let's discuss this tomorrow. And I try to give myself, if I don't walk around the block, I try to give myself like a 24-hour cool down period, or maybe give everyone a 24-hour cool down period. And inevitably, 24 hours later, things are a little bit clearer and emotions are a little lower. So this is a great thing in your relationship life, your spiritual life, your business life. When you're feeling your emotions get the better of you, take a deep breath, count to 10, take a walk around the block, and wait for cooler heads or your cooler head to prevail. So this is another big one, and I'm really smiling about this because this has become all the rage now, dignity in the workplace. And, in my world, this has always been the foundational principle of how we operate in the office. But from a spiritual perspective, the dignity of every individual is there because God created them. Every one of us is made in the image and likeness of God. Even the people of different faith, different sexual persuasion, different race, we're all brothers and sisters in Christ. When you think about that and you believe that, it's very natural to treat people with the dignity that God gave them, because they're a brother or sister of yours. And too often in the world today, we don't do that. I got back late last night from a presentation, and I went down to the bar downstairs for a drink, Manhattan, which I enjoy, and watching I want to watch the end of the game, by the way. Congratulations to the national fans. I was rooting for you. I should tell you, I'm from New York, you probably know. I won't tell you why I was rooting for the Nationals, but anyway, I was glad that you guys won. But there was these two guys, one middle-aged and one younger, late 20-something, next to me, and they're talking about their conquests of various women, and the one guy gets divorced, and now they're heading off to a bar, and I'm thinking, I was kind of worn out. Maybe I should have intervened, but that wasn't going to do any good anyway. But just the way some people think of other people without understanding the dignity of those folks, right? That's how you get into all these HR violations, if you will. But if it starts with an understanding of the dignity of every individual, you'll conduct business the right way without a lot of rules from Washington or anything else. So I'll tell you the one thing, I, as the leader, one of my jobs is to make sure that I'm utilizing the talents of every individual. And if someone fails, I feel like it's my fault. Maybe I didn't have them in the right role. So at Federated, I'm known for, if someone's failing in role A, they don't usually get fired. They get moved to role B. And then they get moved to role C. Now, 3 strikes, I have another issue. But the one thing you don't get 3 strikes on is following the principle of dignity in the workplace. That just isn't acceptable. And, it's a really important thing in the work world and in the spiritual world. So this chart here was the basis of a leadership circle we did with Lumen about a month ago. And it was on servant leadership. And the gospel we used was the Jesus walking on water. And you all remember this gospel, right? The Lord does the miracle of the loaves. Apostles are all excited. He sends them off onto Lake Galilee. And they go, where are you going? He goes, well, I got to go pray. The Lord was a big prayer, as you know. And he arrives, he gets to the fourth watch of the night, which is about 12 hours into this trip. And there's a storm at sea. And by now, the apostles are convinced they're going down. He abandoned us. How did he do this to us? And then he appears walking across the water. He tells Peter, says, if you're the Lord, let me walk with you. And Peter, always a little bit quick, not always prudent maybe, jumps out of the boat and starts to walk. And then sort of says, what am I doing out here? And at that moment, his faith drops a little. That journey I talked about, the faith journey, and he sinks. And as he's sinking, he says, Lord, save me. And this is that scene. But, I was telling the Lumen guys, if you think about it, we model all these great entrepreneurs, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, etc. Here's a guy who built the world's longest living corporation, if you will, the Catholic Church. 2,000 years. And yes, we've had our ups and downs for sure, and our PR crises, and, bad leaders and things going off the rails, and, we're going through one of those periods right now. Nevertheless, he built this thing in a most hostile environment, the Roman Empire, on the basis of 12 apostles who he personally trained. What was his key issue? It was these points here, but servant leadership was a huge element of how he taught them. And, if you take one thing out of this presentation, I would urge you to think of yourselves as servant leaders. Servant leaders inspire people. They don't command them. We all want to command. We think that if we're in charge, we get to tell everyone what to do. That's not the way it works. I always take the org chart when I show people that want to, come to a consulting company that wants to see our org chart. I turn it upside down. So basically, I work for 120 people. And my job is to inspire them, not to command them. Lift people up, don't tear them down. You can practice this today. Try it sometime. When someone's failing, instead of ripping them apart at the seams, find out what they're doing right and lift them up. Give them some confidence. Let your people know that you believe in them. There's something so powerful. If your people believe that you believe in them, they'll walk on water for you. They know you have their back. I end it with love. I know that sounds corny, but I'm talking about agape love, right? The Greek self-sacrificing love. When people feel that you love them, each of them, they will they'll walk on water. They'll go to bat. They'll take a risk. I also have this phrase here, influence is earned, not ordered. Again, we like to think I'm in charge now, so I get to tell you what to do. It doesn't really quite work that way. You've got to earn people's respect. So, humility at the highs. This is another huge one for me. In spiritual life, I'll just say that there's really no advancing without the virtue of humility. It's the foundational virtue. If you think about it, what really helps you advance in spirituality is the recognition, finally, that He is God and I am not. If you ever get to take our tour of the Met, we start out in ancient Egypt, pre-Revelation theology, if you will. And we go to Buddhism, simulation, right? These are both pre-Revelation theologies. And if you think about them, while they're examples of men searching for God, our first inclination is to get there on our own. That's the root sin of many people, including myself, which is pride. So we think we're going to get there on our own. The Egyptians believed they could buy their way into heaven. They built these huge tombs, assembled all the stuff they're going to take with them. And if you look at their art, they're making themselves into gods, seated on the throne. A Buddhist, same way. You're trying to make yourself into, I mean, there's some great aspects of both these spiritualities that are pre-revelation. And the asceticism of them, the detachment, the self-mastery, the prudence, there's a lot of very good spiritual virtues here, but ultimately, they're rooted in this idea that through the white knuckle method, I can get there. Through technique, I can get myself to nirvana, if you will, okay? That won't work in the spiritual life. The only way we can get to heaven is if God takes us there. We need his inspiration, right? And we need his grace. We need the sacraments. That's humility at the highest. In the investment business, this is what it's all about. And I'm sure it's like this in most businesses. The time that's most risky, the time when I am most concerned, is when we're doing well. That's when I'm asking a lot of questions. That's when I'm really pressing people. But that's when they think they're geniuses. And it's hardest when you've been successful to step back and think, well, where could I be off here? So that's when the biggest mistakes get made, when things are going well. So I would just urge you, when things are going well, step back and have a little humility and think, okay, what could be going wrong next that I haven't thought of? Now, the other side of this is what I call confidence at the lows. And again, from a Christian perspective, this is a huge virtue. It's actually one of the things that separates us as Catholics is Christian joy, right? The confidence that we're beloved sons and daughters of God. That's why we can stand on a street corner in Soho and take a beating and never miss a beat. Because we know the Lord loves us. And we have this radiance, this joyfulness about us that people aren't used to seeing in the culture today. They're all chasing after happiness. And it's fleeting, right? And they see a Catholic, especially the young people that have this joyfulness, confidence that they're loved by God. That's deeply rooted. Now, in the business world, this is everything. Well, there's a lot of things that are everything, but this is so important. This was actually, some of you probably, okay, you're freshmen, so last December you were seniors in high school, and you probably, and at the time, does anyone remember the fourth quarter sell-off in the markets last year? Anyone in the room, maybe? Okay, good. I can assure you it was scary. The market was down 20%. Everything was getting taken apart. And it ruined our year in February. We had a great year going until the fourth quarter. And suddenly the recession was coming, the Fed was going to hike, the trade war had started, and things were coming off the rails. And my view was that this was like a false downgrade here. And but my people were so rattled. And all I was preaching the entire month of December was confidence at the lows. We're doing our homework. We know what we're invested in. We know the companies we like. They're 20% cheaper than they were 3 months ago. Let's double up on these positions. We have to be confident. This is a low. It's not a high. This is no time for humility. And, that led to what's been, one of our best years ever, because we used that opportunity when people were panicking, because we were confident to take advantage of it. In the business world, that's going to also be the case. You're going to hit points that seem really bad, but you've done your homework, you've done your work, you've got to stay confident then. Don't get rattled. That's how you get whipsawed. You change direction just because the world disagrees with you temporarily. So the third phrase here, humility at the highest, confidence at the lows, integrity always. And, this is kind of where it starts. Okay, I had a kind of simple upbringing in New York. My father was a steam fitter. He was my best friend, and he was my role model in everything. And the one thing and there was very little I could do that would cause him to be disappointed. But my goodness, lying was that thing. He was telling me, Steve, I was a guy, so this is not to be sexist, but he said a man's word is his bond. You understand that. Once you tell a lie, you lose all credibility. And, you can take that more broadly and say integrity. That's our bond. When in the spiritual world, you can see the importance of integrity, right? The inside and the outside. The Lord talked about this. Folks that on the outside look very holy, but on the inside is something different. But in the business world, integrity is really the key to success. When you're trading millions of dollars over the phone, there's no room for this. And, this is something I'm up against with this minister of Wall Street, because people know about the Wolf of Wall Street, and they have this image of short-term oriented, make a quick profit, rip your client's eyeballs out. Think about it. That might work to make a quick buck. You're never going to build a business that way. Clients are attracted by integrity. And if you do the right thing, it's always the better thing. Unless you're just in it for 3 weeks. And none of you are. You're all young. You've got a long ride ahead of you. So always do the right thing. I tell people, listen, use this test. Forget about the catechism or whatever religion you are and your sort of list of virtues. Just do this. If you do something and tomorrow morning it's on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, how are you going to feel about it? That's a good test, Just don't even go there. So I want to finish, and then we'll take some Q&A, but just a little bit about our mission. Because you are all called to be missionaries. This is not like a thing that is just for a few of us. Now, okay, there's missionaries in different ways, but we're all called to bring the message of Christ to others. It's one true apostolic faith. And I'll tell you a little bit about Missionary Wall Street. These are, I call big themes illustrated. These are some of the themes that appear in this book, which, I hope you'll read. We have some copies, I said, at the back. But there's a lot of really beautiful things here. And one I want to bring out for you, because it's one that's getting downplayed in today's society. This idea of the battle of light and darkness. There's this notion that somehow or other sin has disappeared, there's no devil. And I can tell you, when you're on the streets of New York trying to find people that have fallen away from the faith, you realize that this is a very real battle, actually. And there's these wonderful stories in the Missionary of this light and darkness theme. There's one where I'm on a street corner in Soho, it's late at night, it's cold, it's December, and a group of French people come by. And I asked them, are you guys Catholic? And they said, no, we're not Catholic. I said, well, come on, you're French, all French people are Catholic. No, we're not. So I said, well, what are you then? And the one young man that's sort of connecting with me, which usually to me is a sign that there's something troubling him, by the way, says, we are nothing. And at that moment, I look at his eyes. Maybe it's a loss in translation moment, but he can see in my eyes, I'm asking him a question. Did you just say you're nothing? Because I know you're not nothing. I know you're a son of God. And he looked back at me very sadly. And at that moment, his friends grabbed him and just dragged him off into the darkness, And at last I saw this guy, I think of him every day. That he didn't have the courage to intervene there, maybe. But you'll see other stories in the missionary that end better. One, a year later, maybe it's the missionary kind of reacting to what happened with the Frenchman, but asked a group of young women, hey, are any of you guys Catholic? No, I'm Catholic, one young woman says. They're on their way to a fancy restaurant in Soho. So I jump into the group, and now we're all going to this restaurant in Soho, right? And we're having this conversation, and I know there's something troubling this young woman. And sure enough, there is. And it's serious, you know. And she thinks she's unforgiven. And I say, listen, you're not unforgiven. You're a beloved daughter of God. All you have to do is go back and say you're sorry. You know? Really? Is it that simple? I said, that's what it is. That's what the sacrament of reconciliation is. So she says to her friends, I'm going to confession. They go, what? We're going to dinner. She goes, I know where you're going. I'll meet you later. And about an hour later, I come out of the Mass, and there she is at the back of the church in tears. And all she says is, Steve, thank you for being on that street corner tonight. You changed my life. So she's someone that we snatched out of the darkness, if you will, back into the light. Friends and dogs, we've learned, there's two friend stories right there, if you will. One where the friends dragged them off, another where we fought the friend. There's a whole chapter on dogs, and there's one great story there where a group of young Regnum Christi women, Passionistas, my wife likes to call them, from the Upper East Side, always dressed in, the finest and stuff, and they kind of reluctantly joined the mission. We put them in front of the church, and about half an hour later, Evelyn came by to check on them, and they're standing there holding a leash, and this giant white dog is lying flat on its side. And they're calling her, Evelyn, Evelyn, and she's thinking, oh my goodness, they killed this dog, And the story is that a young man from the neighborhood came by with the dog, and they invited him into church to go to confession. And he goes, of course not, I don't do that kind of thing. I'm in a relationship with God, this kind of stuff. And they go, okay, well, thank you anyway. And then he says, okay, let's go, Chuckles. And the dog lays down. And this is like a 120-pound animal. He says, come on, let's go. I got your favorite dinner here. And the dog's not budging. Then he grabs the leash and starts tugging on the dog, but can't get it to move. And finally says, well, I guess I'm going to confession. And he hands the leash to the young ladies. So there's a lot of stories about dogs as friends, helping missionaries. I don't know, you can take that any way you like. This story about the wall, this idea that, today in the church, the culture, and you all are right in the teeth of this, okay? The culture is pushing people of faith inside the wall. They're saying, look, we don't want to engage in this conversation. It's not polite outside the wall. Go into your, do your thing at Mass, receive the sacraments, or go to the temple if you're Jewish, but keep it there. And if you think about it, all of us actually like that answer anyway. It's safer there, we're protected, we're with like-minded people, etc. But you were called in the world, you're leaders. You were called here for a reason. And not to hide your light under a bushel basket, but to go outside the wall. The fastest growing religious denomination of the country today are fallen away Catholics. And they're outside the wall. They're not inside the wall. And they have been pursuing something that has left them very, very unhappy, many of them. I can tell you, talk to 3 million people now on the streets of New York. There's a lot of unhappy people out there. But they don't know how to get back over the wall. And they're just waiting for you to come out and take them by the hand. Okay, it doesn't have to be as radical as going on the mission in Soho, but all of you having your own circles, friends, who are kind of spiritually lost a little bit, invite them to Mass with you. See what happens. Try to bring them back inside. We're not alone. The book starts with a story about this. Maybe I'll not take you through that story, but You can read the first page, and I think you'll be gripped. And then love never fails. It's just, this is actually the first three words of Missionary of Wall Street. Obviously, it's from 1 Corinthians. Many of you will use this gospel, or from St. Paul's letters. You'll use it at your weddings, typically. But it's so true. Love given to us by Christ, right? This is not our love, it's His love. And when you have a loving relationship with Christ, you want to bring that to others. And when you bring it, it never fails because it's coming from Him, And I'll tell you one short story. We were on the mission one night, and a Buddhist monk arrived, Hindu monk, and he's watching us. And I'm watching him out of the corner of my eye. I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be an interesting dialogue at some point. And after about 15 minutes, sure enough, he comes over. He says, I've been watching you two now for 15 minutes. I want to tell you, you're not going to convert me. I'm a Hindu monk, and I see you're a Hindu monk. And he says, but I just got to say, I've never seen anything like this. You two guys love every single person you meet out here. The ones who are ignoring you, the ones who are being, abusive, and then the ones that you're engaging with, that are willing to talk to you. It's just really remarkable, and it's something very beautiful, and I've never seen this before. You got to keep doing what you're doing. I fully endorse it, if you will. This is from Mother Teresa. I see you have her image up at the altar there, which is so beautiful. And I want to finish with, I think we've got, if I can figure out how to do this. Oh, maybe I lost it. This is a little 80-second video from about the mission that you might enjoy. We're going to play this. I'm sensitive to the time. I will tell you, if anyone would like to join the mission in New York, certainly follow us on Facebook. You'll get updates on what's going on, stories, etc. And we're doing the next mission in Advent, so we love it when we can get young folks helping us out there. We've had over 1,000 missionaries now in the last decade helping us, and not only will you change lives, your own life will be changed by that shared experience with the Lord out on the streets. Do we have time for a few questions? How are we doing? A little bit, right? Yes?
How do you handle when you're out on the streets and people are very openly against what you're preaching to them?
Well, first of all, we're never preaching. That doesn't work well. I mean, the image of a missionary is on a soapbox preaching, Lord is coming, repent. We're asking questions. We engage people lovingly and joyfully. And even when their initial response, we have so many examples of, let's say a young Muslim man, of course I wouldn't talk to you, you're all trying to kill us, And I'll say, well, wait a second here, where'd you get that from? And if you approach people lovingly and joyfully, some of them will brush you off for sure. We get a lot of brush packages, but they'll actually engage with you. And a lot of folks are seeking the same. We're all sons and daughters of God, and we're all seeking Him. And when they recognize that you're there because you love them, not because you hate them, and not because you're judging them, you can really get into some incredible engagement. So yeah, ask questions. Don't, in general, that's sort of my leadership style, but ask questions is better than giving answers. Yes. Yeah.
So I'm curious what your idea about light and darkness. If someone was a Catholic and then moved to a different faith and they feel satisfied in that faith, would you consider themselves in the light or the dark?
They could be in the light. I mean, there's different paths to God, for sure. So if they're firmly following that faith, I mean, I have a story in the book about a young Jewish man who approaches me, and again, initially starts off as in a very hostile fashion. And the more we talk, the more he begins to confess to me that while he's Jewish, he's actually not practicing his faith. And then he breaks down and tells me he's got a hole in his heart. And the story ends with him promising me to go back to the temple that night, to the synagogue, and pray for the missionary. So, yeah, our objective isn't always to get people to the sacrament of confession or to convert them into Catholicism, but to get them on a road back to God. And so if they're Jewish, we will try to work them in that direction. I want to get people back on a path. There's a lot of non-Catholics who are surprised to hear they're very welcome to come into the church and light a candle. The Christians, all sorts of religions come in and light candles for us. So, yeah, we're not necessarily we're certainly not trying to convert people to Catholicism. Our primary goal is to find former Catholics and bring them back to the faith. But when we engage other faiths, and we have a chapter on this in the book, we're trying to get a lot of those ones I've lost their kind of former Jews, former Christians. So we're also trying to get them back on path. Yeah. Well, we run both institutional money. In fact, we have a huge institutional account here in D.C. Can't say who, but yeah, so we run a lot of mutual funds, as you probably know. Although all of that is sold kind of institutionally because we sell it through advisors. We don't sell directly to the public. But we're usually branded, federated, not always. Sometimes it'll be a non-branded product, branded by one of our customers. But we also, we manage, if you have a large pool of money, we'll manage that for you separately. But, our minimums there are, like 25 or 50 million, so it's got to be a very large account. Yes?
Would you say that the culture on Wall Street has any effect on the culture of the nation in America, or do you think they're separate?
Well, yeah, there's this idea Main Street and Wall Street are two different things. I think that people on Wall Street have a special obligation to affect the culture. And there are plenty of wolves of Wall Street, I think, that affect it in a negative way, which is partly why, another reason I wrote this book. But I think we all individually, I just tell my staff, forget about everything going around you, President Trump or whatever. We each have an individual accountability to make the world a better place. And you don't get off the hook by voting for some candidate who says he's going to do it. We each have an individual accountability. And I think when you take that attitude to it, that can be impactful to the culture. We're also, you probably know that we recently bought a European firm called Hermes Asset Management, which kind of leads the way in Europe in environmentally, socially responsible investing. You've read about that. And that's something that we think is a real big next thing in the investment business, and we're trying to be out in front with that. We think it's very consistent with our internal value system in many ways. Yeah.
Yeah, is there a branch leading equivalent of Direct Christie in DC?
Yeah, there is a very large Direct Christie here group in DC. In fact, I was with them last night in a really beautiful meeting. And we've got a Direct Christie person here, I think, in the room, right? Yeah, here we are. So you guys should link up afterwards. And I think there's a team here on campus. Is that right? Yeah. And I know we have several Direct Christie folks here at CUA that have been with us up at the Mission. And by the way, on that note, we always have 5 or 6 summer interns at Federated every summer. We love our interns because they do actual work and meaningful work, but they also do a lot of service stuff too. We have a kind of combined program. So if any of you have an interest, we've never had a CUA student. We have had AVE students who do a great job for us, but certainly shoot us your resume. Yeah.
How did you balance like family life, spiritual life, and career life? Was it easy at first? How did you how did you put in a routine for that?
Yeah, it's never easy. It wasn't easy at first. It's still not easy today. It's very important though to keep a balance, and I think you just got to have a sense of your priorities and what your lines are. I think it does help a little bit to be in a business where you can control your time a little bit. I mean, I work very long days, but I pretty much know my calendar 3-4 months out, and I can plan around things. And I always never miss a big kid thing. So I think you've got to be very focused on it. I think it's a great question. But remember that keep your perspective on things. And early in your career, you've got to work very hard and make your name for yourself, if you will. But if you lose your soul in the process, or lose your family in the process, that's not going to work. I would also challenge all of you that there's 24 hours in a day, and you allocate them correctly. You're trying to balance things. There's a lot of things you can weed out that are wastes of time. Still end up with a few hours for your spouse at the end of the night. The other thing I try to do before I go home is say a deep prayer to get myself into family mode, because at the office things are moving kind of like that video in high speed, and everyone works at different speeds. But you got to remember that when you guys are a little bit ways from family life, but you get a sense. Yes.
I just have a few questions about your images. On the one side, it looks like you had an image of Lou Gehrig's speech. Well, why did you particularly put that image for that slide? And you may want to explain to the students who Lou Gehrig is and what that speech was.
Yeah, maybe Lou Gehrig, was a famous New York Yankee. So, but he was always viewed as a man of great integrity, and the sense of integrity within the game, the way he played the game. And in New York, people look to him as an example of how to do things right, play by the rules, and do the right thing. And so for some, it's sort of an epitome of that. Playing the game the right way, not taking shortcuts. Yeah, the images, a lot of them are from our med tour, and I didn't have time to go through them all, and that's probably a whole separate talk, but I did hit on a few anyways. Other questions? Well, thank you all again. I do have, as I said, copies back there in the book. They're gifts from the Blanfords who donated them to you. And I'm here to sign them if you like. So thank you again for coming.